Samsung's Galaxy Book 4 series is out and about, and while all the big YouTubers are out looking at the fancier Pro and Ultra models, no one's really asking what about the base Galaxy Book 4? What has Samsung kept for us at the bottom of the barrel? Well, fret not, because in today's review, that's exactly what we're gonna find out. I actually got the base configuration within the base model, which includes the Core 5 processor. We've got 8 GB of LPDDR4X memory. We've also got a measly 256 GB SSD, and of course we do have Intel's base graphics, and past that we do get Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2 combined with a 15-inch full HD display. Now this is a very interesting laptop. I've had a chance to play with it for some time, and I've definitely got my own opinion, but we're going to keep things as objective as possible, so let's get into it. Given this is the base model, things are kept pretty straightforward as far as packaging is concerned. You literally have a box that says Galaxy Book 4. Anyway, when you open up the box, behind some protective packaging, you have the Galaxy Book 4 laptop itself, nimble as ever, but more on that in a quick minute. You also have a USB-C to USB-C charging cable coupled with a charging brick rated for 65 watts, and I love the form factor Samsung goes with when it comes to the charging aspect. One of the things that makes the Galaxy Book 4 series as a whole so special is that Samsung doesn't cheap out with exterior build quality even on their base model here. As you can see, you've got a full metallic exterior from top to bottom. The choice of dark gray color here really brings a further premium element. It's a relatively linear and straightforward design. It shares a lot of design elements with the Ultra and Pro series, though there are subtle differences. Overall, you've got a weight just shy of 3.5 pounds, making this a reasonably light 15-inch laptop. Now, starting with the top side, you'll notice again a sort of matte finish, no unnecessary textures. It's very clean, very minimalist. You've got some basic Samsung branding, and also there seems to be a high degree of fingerprint resistance, which is an improvement compared to previous generations. All the relevant ports on either side, and diversity is pretty good, but standards are definitely lacking. So on one side, you have a Type-C port, followed by an Ethernet jack, a dated HDMI 1.4 port, USB-A Super Speed port, and one more Type-C port. On the other side, one more USB-A Super Speed port, a good old headphone jack, and a micro SD card reader. As you can see, lots of ports, but the lack of Thunderbolt 4 as well as HDMI 2.1 clearly tells you that Samsung has almost artificially handicapped these ports to some extent, which is a bit of a shame. The bottom of the laptop has a nice clean metallic exterior. It is a removable lid. You'll also notice you have a relatively narrow air intake vent, though I think thermals are going to impress you, so don't worry there. You also have rubber grips to keep the laptop in place, and then you'll notice you have a bottom firing speaker setup based on those two speaker grills. Unfolding this laptop immediately reminds you that you've purchased a 15-inch machine here because of all that available palm rest space, and thankfully Samsung has not sabotaged the whole thing with random stickers, though the Intel one is still there if you're into that sort of thing. At the center, you have a plastic surface trackpad, which is a little disappointing again, though thankfully the flex isn't too bad. There is a little bit, but it's pretty marginal all things considered, and it's also a pretty tactile trackpad again, given it's a plastic one. The keyboard is not bad either, honestly, so you do have a little bit of a problem with the layout. The shift key and arrow keys are unnecessarily compressed, which can be a little problematic when trying to use this keyboard initially. However, the rest of the keycaps are pretty large in surface area. On a lighter note, literally, you do have built-in backlighting with multiple brightness settings. You also have the inclusion of a built-in 10 keypad, which is great, and then you also have a fingerprint reader, which doubles as the power button. The typing experience here is actually pretty decent. You get a decent amount of key travel, and you have a very tactile feeling keyboard. It doesn't feel squishy or excessively soft, which again is pretty nice. Another broken hinge is the expression I like to use whenever I see a single tier mechanism hinge on any laptop, period. They are vulnerable due to the extreme pressure they put on the body, and if not opened properly, they can definitely damage the hinge mechanism in the long term. With that said though, the good news is that the wobble is fairly limited on this laptop. Display fitting does have a plastic trimming all around, which is acceptable given this is a base model. Thankfully, the actual chin at the bottom is pretty thin and not all that noticeable. The bezels are more or less average and within modern day standards, and then at the top you have a fairly thin forehead, though at the center of which you have an afterthought of a webcam that has a 720p resolution. It looks blurry, it's bad in low light, it's an afterthought. Ayo, Samsung 2015 called. They want their displays back because that's pretty much what you get here. So things start off modest enough with a IPS panel including a full HD resolution which gives you a 16:9 aspect ratio. None of that is a crime by itself, but then you're still stuck with a base refresh rate of just 60 Hz in 2024, and to make matters worse, you've got a mere 300 nits of peak brightness, which is just barely enough to compensate for all the glare despite having a matte finish. The real crime here, however, is that 65% sRGB color rating. The fact is, it looks washed out, it's not a great display from that perspective, and if you are doing color sensitive activities like photo or video editing, this display is definitely not appropriate for those kind of use cases, and honestly it's just a big missed opportunity by Samsung. We should have at least had 100% sRGB rating here as a standard. A quick rundown of technical specs as configured. We've got Intel's Core 5 processor, which can also be configured as a Core 7. We've got 8GB of LPDDR4X memory, which can be doubled up to 16. And then we've got Intel's integrated graphics on board. Now, day-to-day performance is pretty smooth, whether it's surfing the web or doing some Word document crunching, for example. More demanding activities, like for example writing code, are also very much possible despite the limited amount of RAM, though you will run into occasional bottlenecks and slower performance. And then even more demanding activities like 3D animations are also possible to some extent, though again keep in mind the limited RAM here is going to serve as a bottleneck, so make sure you double up on that if you're going to do that kind of stuff. The most demanding of activities like 1080p video editing on programs like DaVinci Resolve is technically possible, though expect a fair bit of frame drops. Again, this is less to do with the processor and more to the RAM. I keep bringing up the RAM because it is very important you consider getting the 16GB variant with the Core 7 processor if you're doing anything more than general productivity here, because then you actually have a laptop that does a pretty decent job. Otherwise, you're going to run into a lot of bottlenecks like I did over here. Gaming performance is surprisingly impressive for this machine. Despite having a Core 5 processor, integrated graphics, and just 8GB of RAM, Fortnite comfortably ran close to 60 frames per second on medium settings. This is honestly not normal behavior when you compare to previous generations and is a huge improvement and definitely praiseworthy. Thermals have dramatically improved. Under unrealistic peak loads, this laptop barely touched 38 degrees Celsius surface temp, and under more realistic loads, we hit around 35 degrees Celsius, all of which are again super cool numbers and about 5 to 6 degrees cooler than previous generations. Now, fan noise is also pretty decent, so you'll stay around the high 40s when doing moderately intensive tasks, though you can peak at around 51 to 52 decibels, though that doesn't happen too often, so all things considered, again, thermals are out of the park with this laptop. I really hate to break it to you, but RAM here is entirely soldered like most Meteor Lake chips, unfortunately, so make sure you get the right configuration from the get-go so you don't have any regrets or performance issues. As far as storage is concerned, Samsung actually gives you two M.2 slots, one of which of course is preoccupied, but you can use the additional slot for expanding storage, and then the Wi-Fi is also replaceable thanks to a modular M.2 slot. Loaded with a 54 watt-hour battery, you can actually expect a pretty decent runtime of close to 11 hours doing general productivity-based activities. Now, as far as speaker quality is concerned, you've got a bottom firing setup here, and while it's nowhere as good as the likes of the MacBook Air, it's not bad. It gets pretty loud, there's little distortion at higher volume levels, and a little bit of depth as well. Here's a quick sound test for reference. Stand for this today. I'ma keep my head down, I'm okay. I don't wanna listen to a word they say. And we all know fear is a slogan, yeah. And we all feel broken, yeah. And we all outspoken. Need someone who could just so shines I struggle in this place. With an approximate value of about $740, the Galaxy Book 4 definitely targets itself as a upper mid-range machine. However, it has a lot to show for it, but it also has a lot kind of holding it back. I mean, on one side, you get a great build with that metallic exterior, a decent keyboard combined with lots of ports, but then on the other side, those same ports seem to be severely outdated outdated in many aspects. You also get a very mediocre display that has no business being around in 2024. Speaking of which, that webcam also needs to be upgraded to 1080p. It should not be that low res. And then a few other aspects of this machine just kind of hold it back, almost like Samsung's trying to upsell you to get the more powerful Pro variant. Nonetheless, I still think if you can score this laptop 50 or even $100 off its normal price tag, it's a great general productivity machine, though I strongly encourage you get the 16GB variant, as that will help you a ton in the long term and provides a lot more value. Let me know what you think of this machine. If you already have it, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. And as always, if you enjoyed the content, make sure you subscribe to this channel, like this video, so I can produce more of this awesome stuff for you awesome people. Catch you in the next one.